I've had you guys in and out of class for the last couple of months, several weeks and months. Um, Not every class, perhaps, but a good portion of the classes. And so my vision was in the fall that I would do, the as we've said 100 times, um, like a series of 4 classes every 4 weeks, the same courses. Um, that's not really the way it's playing out. So I think we may just go back to the way I did it in the past, which is, you know, you log in every week and we'll discuss something different. Normally history related, sometimes government or civics, or sometimes economics or geography. But normally the easy thing and the best thing to do is discuss American history at some point. Um, and so we jump around. We're not following things in order because you three logged in this week might be different than the people logged in next week, and maybe you miss a week and you come back a month from now or whatever. Um, so we will do. I think what we'll do is just a standalone topic every week. We'll do a reading, as you see on the screen today. I think reading skills are always something you should be working on. Um, and I keep it simple. So we'll do basically a reading, looking at different resources. Sometimes primary resources like those original documents. We've looked at the Constitution. We've looked at the Declaration of Independence. Those primary documents. That's important. Um, but I think that's what we'll do. We'll kind of set aside the 4 week course of GED or high set social studies, and we'll just focus on a different topic every week, normally history related. You know, and then when you go and take your test and you bow out and you're done with this class, and that's fine. So be it. Um, so before we get started, I have a topic in mind: McCarthyism today from the 1950s. Joe McCarthy was a senator, and we can discuss that. Any questions on what occurred yesterday? So what happened yesterday? Was anybody unaware? Anybody not see the news at all?
No, all I heard was that people went in the White House.
Not the White House, in the Capitol building.
Oh, yeah, in the Capitol.
Yeah. Okay. Um, Now again, as always, I don't want to get into politics here, um, but it is important. I think that was a very, very important day in what we will someday call American history. Um, Anybody know what? So people went into, regular people went into the Capitol building. Um, any Olawakimi, did you see the news at all? Did you see anything?
No, I was just yeah. I don't not that I don't listen to the news, but these days there is nothing about the news to listen to. It's
Right.
the same topic they are talking over and over again. So I'm just waiting for 20th to come. That is when I know that there is trouble in the land. If 20th comes around and there is no handing over, then I know things are not the way it's supposed to be. But right now, we are all just praying that everything will be good.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, yes, yeah. Generally, it can be a downer. It can be sad. It can make you sad for sure to watch the news these days. Um, but what happened yesterday was very unique in America. So what happened was, we had the November election, right? November, what was it? November 3rd. Um, as we've discussed, and I think you have some understanding of the electoral college is the way that the votes are sort of counted and why they matter. because it's not popular vote that matters in in the presidential election, right? It's not everybody in America votes and the winner, the person with the most votes wins, right? We go by the electoral college where every state has a certain number of electors, and then those numbers add up, and in this case, Joe Biden won, right? Um, and so we had, and that was November 3rd was the election. And then there was some concern from Donald Trump's side that there was bad things happening with the election. He took those cases to court, and in 80 different court cases across many different states, they they showed no evidence of anything major being wrong with the election. So the Electoral College met on, or they didn't meet, they met in every different state because of the pandemic. But the electors from each state did actually meet and cast their Electoral College votes on a day, and I think it was like December 14th or something. Okay, so that came and went December 14th. Yesterday, January 6th, was the day when those votes, like actual papers in big, beautiful mahogany wood boxes, are delivered to Congress and they're counted. Now, this doesn't really matter because we all know, we know the results of the election. But you think when they wrote the Constitution 240 years ago, they needed to count the votes. They needed to gather them up and count the votes. This is in the 1800s, or the 1700s. So it was a big deal back then. Today, it's not that big of a deal. So they count the votes. It's a joint session of Congress, which means the House of Representatives, 435 people, and the Senate, 100 senators. A joint session of Congress together. They get together. They count the votes. That was going to start at 1 p.m. yesterday. Okay, it did start at 1 p.m. yesterday in the Capitol building. Let me pull up a picture here of the Capitol building. Well, now we're seeing. Okay, so here's I just Googled U.S. Capitol building. Okay, and we see from the news yesterday. Here's a picture of the Capitol building. Okay. Now the Capitol building is on the, I don't know which is which. I think on the left-hand side in this view is the House of Representatives side, and the right-hand side is the Senate. They have two different chambers, big rooms where they can all sit and do their debating and voting and discussing. At 1 p.m., they were going to gather and they were going to count the votes state by state and tally the numbers and declare Joe Biden and Kamala Harris the winner of the presidential election, which we all knew, right? That's not a surprise. At noon, however, President Trump held a rally in front of the White House, which is about a mile away. Let's see. Let's look. Okay, here's a map. So here's a map. Let me get this bigger. Maybe it's not going to let me. The National Mall. How can I make this bigger? Oh, I'll zoom in. Well, I lost it. All right, well, it's not even that big. Okay, the National Mall. This on the right-hand side is the Capitol building, the U.S. Capitol building, which we just looked at a picture of. This is the White House up here. This is in Washington, D.C., obviously. This tall pillar, tall tower is the Washington Monument you've probably seen before. And in front of the White House, this circle is called the ellipse. And in front of the White House, Donald Trump held a rally at which he made an hour-long speech and told all the thousands of people gathered that they were going to march down to the Capitol building and I don't really know what he had planned, because like you're not going to change the votes at this point. The way to do that was to prove that there was fraud in the courts, and they've done the court cases, and nothing was proven, nothing was shown. So like there's no more opportunities for Trump to win the election. It's over, it's done. But he told this crowd of thousands of people, we're going to march down to the Capitol building, where they were there, that the senators and congressmen were there. And he said, we're not gonna stop fighting, we're gonna win, and we're gonna, I don't really know what his plan was. So those thousands of people walked down to the Capitol building and pushed their way past police and broke into the Capitol building. Let's get back to the pictures. So there's,
Ooh.
they fought with the police officers, the Capitol Police that were there, and pushed past the police. I don't know how they pushed past the police, got into the building. The senators and congressmen that were there meeting in the big rooms were evacuated for safety. And just this mob of angry Trump supporters, protesters, were just wandering around the Capitol building, past police. A pretty crazy thing. They broke into and took over the Capitol building. Nothing like that's ever happened. Actually, the last time something like that happened was in the War of 1812. So 100 years ago, over 100 years ago. During the War of 1812, the British soldiers, these are like the redcoats, British soldiers in 1812, 1814 was the year. They broke into and burned the Capitol building. Of course, it's so big and stone and marble, it didn't burn down, but they burned the British soldiers in 1814 burned the Capitol building. Well, there were no fires set yesterday, but they shattered windows, smashed up furniture, spray painted messages to people on the walls. Just an absolutely insane, crazy time. So we're going to be hearing about this for a long time.
Mhm.
Trump this morning. Oh, so what happened? Very interestingly, after a few hours, the senators and congressmen said, we are not going to be stopped from doing our job. And they after police had secured the building again, had gotten everybody out, they met again and picked up doing their job of counting the Electoral College votes, which it took all night. And at 3:45 this morning, they finished the counting of the Electoral College votes. And at 3:45, Vice President Mike Pence, who the vice president, according to the Constitution, the vice president is he's called the president of the Senate. Okay. So one of the roles of being vice president in the Constitution is you are in charge of the Senate, although you're not really in charge, but you just, in certain times, in certain jobs, there's times when when the vice president runs the Senate. Okay. Not really telling people what to do, but just kind of runs the process of whatever the Senate is doing. This is one of those times. The counting of the Electoral College votes, the vice president runs that process. He's not doing anything, but he's, hitting his gavel and making sure things, this person gives a speech and then that person gives a speech and then we count the votes, and he's just kind of running the process. So at 3:45 this morning, Vice President Mike Pence told the world that Joe Biden won, officially, finally won the Electoral College votes from the November election. Shortly after that, the White House gave a statement from the president saying that we will have a peaceful transfer of power on January 20th. 2 weeks from now is the inauguration of the next president. Um, so the White House said we will have a peaceful transition. We've already failed to have a peaceful transition. That's, in my opinion, that's over. We didn't have a peaceful transition. We just had thousands of people break into and storm into the Capitol building. That's not a peaceful transition. So now the president is saying, well, we're going to have a peaceful transition, but it's over. It's like if I come into your house and say, you know, I light your couch on fire, and then after we put out the fire, I say, well, you know what, we're not going to have any problems. Like we just had a problem, you know. So that's my opinion. It's shocking. It's not, you know, the Capitol building has been burned by British troops 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Um, but these are Americans, you know, we presume American citizens, Americans breaking into the Capitol building, which is shocking, shocking. Um, so any questions on that? I mean, I can try to answer any questions. Any questions about what's going on?
I just have a contribution.
Yeah.
The president is now announcing that there's going to be a peaceful transition. Why just yesterday, 4 people died
Hmm.
because of their whatever. How is it going to be peaceful?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I view
So those four
this.
people that lost their life for nothing or what? Or can they bring them back? Can
Yeah.
they bring them back to life?
Uh, no, there's no. I mean, the White House said, the president said, although not on camera, we haven't seen him say anything like this, but they say that the president said that we will have a peaceful transition on October 20th or on January 20th. Maybe on January 20th we will have peace, but yesterday we didn't have peace. So yeah, 4 people did die. One woman, a protester, was shot in the Capitol building, presumably in the trying to break in. And then 3 other people they're saying had medical emergencies. I guess that's like if one of these people breaking into the Capitol building maybe had a heart attack. I'm guessing 3 people had a heart attack and died, which is not the same as getting shot, but still, people died. 4 people died in this.
Mhm.
No, it's shocking. And Donald Trump put out a video message yesterday, um, telling people to go home peacefully, but he also continued to say that the election is stolen, that Joe Biden is an illegitimate, wrongful president. He's not. So Donald Trump seems to be backing off, but he's not. He's not backing off. Um, so the next 2 weeks could be very, very interesting, scary, interesting.
It's yeah. That's what
Um,
I'm going to say. That it's going to be until the handing over is over. Even
mhm.
months after the handing over, I think things can still go wrong.
Oh yeah,
Anything
right.
can still happen with what is happening right now.
Hmm.
If it is all underdeveloped countries, they will be saying it's because they are underdeveloped. That's why all this is happening. I can't believe all this is happening in the US.
Well, that's what a lot of people were saying yesterday. Like it was as if we were watching the news from, some other country. Um, we are the world's oldest, strongest democracy,
Yeah,
and what is a democracy except the idea that we have elections, we all vote, and we have, you vote, I vote, we all vote, and if you don't like the outcome of the election,
you
you
go to court,
you still respect the election,
election. Mhm.
right? And if you take that away and people say, well, I'm not going to listen because I don't agree with the outcome of the election. That's that's not a democracy. You don't have a democracy anymore. So um, the idea that a president of the United States would send a mob, an angry mob of people down to the legislative branch to stop them from doing what they were doing is shocking. So to talk about the Constitution, then people are, and I don't know if this, I can't even begin to guess if this is going to go anywhere, but people have talked, they're floating the idea, and Republican people are floating the idea that the 25th Amendment should take effect. The 25th Amendment, let's Google it. 25th Amendment text. Let's read the 25th Amendment. Okay. 25th Amendment it was passed by Congress in 1965, ratified in 1967. There's a couple of parts to it. Let's look at it. Basically, it addresses, this is 1967, so this is shortly after John F. Kennedy, JFK, was shot and killed, right? Even in the original Constitution, they said if something happens to the president, then who becomes president when, say, the president is assassinated? Who then becomes the president?
The vice president.
The vice president. Okay. So that's been true from the very beginning, right? Even as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, as they wrote the Constitution, they knew, okay, something's someday going to happen to a president. And if something happens, who then, you can't have no president. So they said from the very beginning, the vice president steps in. Okay. And completes the 4-year term of that president, whether there's 1 month or 3 years. That vice president then becomes president and finishes that 4-year term. He can name his own new vice president. And sometimes there's been, we've had 4 assassinations in American history, and a couple other times presidents have died. This actually happens more often than you think. A president dies in office. There's been some times where the vice president names his own, okay, when the new president, I'll say, names his own new vice president. And then there's been other times where he says, well, you know what, I don't need a vice president. So that's kind of interesting. But in 1965, I think, JFK was shot, right? And so the Congress or the states or somebody thought, we need a better plan for in the Constitution. We need a better plan for if something happens to the president. Okay. So Section 1 this is the text of the 25th Amendment. Section 1. In case, can you guys see my screen with the
Yes.
Okay. Section 1. In case of the removal of the president from office or of his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president. Okay, that's nothing new, but they put it in there. Okay. Section 2, whenever there is a vacancy in the office of the vice president, the president shall nominate a vice president who shall take office upon confirmation by a majority vote of both houses of Congress. So we've talked about checks and balances. So the new president can name his vice president, and that person is then confirmed by both houses of Congress. Okay. Okay. So I didn't realize that they had to be confirmed by both houses of Congress, but that's interesting. Section 3, whenever the president transmits to the president pro tempore of the Senate, just the leader of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, his written declaration that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, and until he transmits to them a written declaration to the contrary, such powers and duties shall be discharged by the vice president as acting president. Okay, this has happened. Now, I can't think off the top of my head specifically, but I think Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush, I could be wrong, but past presidents, not too long ago, have gone in for surgery. Okay, I think they were older men, so they got a colonoscopy. Okay, not a fun surgery, but they got a colonoscopy. And when you get a colonoscopy, most of the time they put you under, right? They give you anesthesia and you are unconscious. Well, we can't really have a country without where the president is unconscious, right? Or in surgery. So on a couple of occasions, Section 3 of the 25th Amendment has been put into action. For a brief period of time, the president sends a message to the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and I'm sure says, okay, today at 2 o'clock or tomorrow, next Thursday at 3 o'clock, whatever, I'm going to have surgery. And during that time, the vice president becomes what we call acting president. Okay, doesn't become president of the United States, but we say he becomes acting president. That's happened a few times. When that's for when the president knows something's going to happen. Okay, that's not emergencies. That's Section 3 of the 25th Amendment. And when it's done and the president is well and he's ready to do the job, he gives them a written declaration to the contrary. And he sends a message and says, I'm okay, and it's over, and he takes over as president. That has happened before. Section 4 is being discussed now. It's been discussed in the past for Donald Trump, but it's being discussed now. There's news reports. Now we shall see what happens in the coming days. The one way or the other, Donald Trump will stop being president at noon on 2 weeks from now, Wednesday, January 20th. The inauguration happens at noon, January 20th. That is in the Constitution. Okay, that cannot be changed. That's in the Constitution. So there's only 2 weeks left of Donald Trump being president. So some people are saying, well, what's the big deal? Let him be president for 2 more weeks. Other people are saying what happened yesterday at his direction is dangerous and he needs to be punished, or certainly he's a danger to the United States. So some people are saying Section 4 of the 25th Amendment needs to be enacted. Okay, so it says, now there's a little bit of back and forth here, but let's see if we can get the main idea. It says, whenever the vice president and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments, which is the cabinet, right? The Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Education, the Secretary of Labor, a majority of the cabinet, the vice president and a majority of the cabinet, or of such other body as Congress may by law provide, which I don't know what, there isn't really another body at the moment. Whenever the vice president and a majority of the cabinet vote, transmit to the president pro tempore of the Senate, the leader of the Senate, and Speaker of the House of Representatives, their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. The vice president shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting president. Now, this could be if the president has, let's say, these are older people. We tend to elect older people as president. Let's say the president has a stroke. Okay, he's not dead. He's up and he's walking around. And maybe he seems like he can do a good job. But if the president, let's say the president has a stroke and he doesn't seem to be very well, and you don't want an unwell person being the president of the United States, the vice president could take a look at the situation, maybe consult with some doctors, and the vice president could get the cabinet together and say, hey, I don't like this situation. I don't think he should be president right now. And so they would vote and send a message to the Senate and the House of Representatives that the vice president becomes acting president. Okay, could happen for a health reason. Right now, it's not being discussed for health reasons. It's being discussed because some people think that the president is a danger to the country. Okay, so they send a message, and the vice president immediately assumes the powers of acting president. Now, there's a plan. Okay, so that's not permanent. So there's a little bit of a plan. So let's read on a little bit here. It says thereafter, when the president transmits the new president, I think. Oh no, the original president. When the original president transmits to the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that no inability exists, he shall resume the powers and duties of his office, unless the vice president and majority of the cabinet transmit within 4 days to the Senate and the House their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and the duties of his office. So let's say the president has a stroke and he's okay, but he's not well, right? The vice president could take a vote with the vice president and the majority of the cabinet. The vice president would become acting president. If the president who had the stroke comes back and makes a written declaration and says, I am okay, I can do the job, I'm just fine, then he would become president again. This could even be on the same day, even. Unless the vice president goes within 4 days and writes again to the Senate and the House of Representatives and says, no, this is really a situation. We don't think he should be president. It says, thereupon Congress shall decide the issue, assembling within 48 hours for that purpose, if not in session. If the Congress within 21 days after receipt of the latter written declaration, or if Congress is not in session within 21 days after Congress is required to assemble, if they determine by 2/3 vote of both houses that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall continue to discharge that same as acting president. So the House then votes. So there can be a little bit of back and forth. So I don't know what's going to happen. I would be very surprised if Vice President Mike Pence and a majority of Trump's cabinet vote and choose to remove him from power. I'd be very surprised, very, very surprised. But if that happened, I assure you, Trump would then do the what's written in here, or somebody would do it for him, and write to the Senate and the House of Representatives that he is okay and he should be president. So there would be a little bit of back and forth. If we were to see that in the news, there would be some back and forth. It would be very messy. I would be very surprised by that. Vice President Pence has been very, very, very loyal to President Trump. And I don't see him taking that power away from President Trump. That is the 25th Amendment. Okay. Any questions on how that works? And it's not just for this situation, it's also for health reasons, or we saw in Section 3, the president can do it himself, give away his power temporarily, as has happened before when the president has a surgery or something. So any questions about that? Okay. I think it's good, and it's surprising that it took them till 1967 to come up with this kind of plan. But the plan is there, and maybe someday it'll be used. Section 3 has been used. Maybe someday Section 4 will be used. The other thing that is being discussed by certainly Democrats in Congress, but also some Republicans, is that they should impeach him for a second time and this time remove Trump from office. Remember, a year ago, he was impeached by the House of Representatives, which means basically he was accused of the crime of obstruction of justice and some things. But then it goes to the Senate where they actually act as the trial, as the court, and they chose not to do anything at all, actually, not to punish him in any way whatsoever. So he's been impeached, but he's not been removed from office. Some people are saying he should be impeached and removed from office today. Other people say, well, so lots of people say, well, nothing's wrong. Those people who attacked the Capitol building were just protesting. I disagree with the fact that the idea that they were just protesting, but some people say that. Other people say, well, why bother impeaching Trump a second time? It's not going to do anything. It doesn't matter. Just wait 2 weeks and he'll be gone. So there's different viewpoints. There's different ways this could go. But I thought it'd be interesting today to discuss a couple of the different scenarios as things happen. Any questions at all?
I don't have questions, but similar things happened back in my country, that is Nigeria.
Okay.
With our late President Yaradua. He was sick and the vice president became the acting president. Later on, he died.
Mm-hmm.
And the acting president became the president and later went for another election where he won. So after acting as the acting president, he now later on became the elected president. With the 25th Amendment that you read now, I was just reflecting back when all those things were happening. Definitely, I think they borrowed from the America Constitution to set up. They are majorly British colony, so they use most of British system to run the system back in Nigeria. But when you are reading this, I was just going back and saying, oh, this was what happened during the period of that area.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. But with the situation now in America, even if they should impeach President Trump, is it going to have any effect on him?
It wouldn't. I mean, the question in people's minds is, yesterday he instructed a group of thousands of angry people to go down to the Capitol building. Now, he didn't say break in, but it wasn't surprising, with as angry as Trump has been and as angry as he's made his followers, it's not surprising that they broke in and acted the way that they did. So the question is, if that's what he did yesterday, what's he going to do tomorrow? What's he going to do on January 19th or 20th? So that's people's concerns. Would it affect him personally? I don't think he will. He's said a million times now, he will never admit that he lost the election. So I don't think you can change his personal behavior. What it would change is if you impeached him and removed him from office, Mike Pence would obviously become president, and maybe that would calm things down. I don't know. Maybe it would make things worse. I don't know.
But my something is this: if he is impeached now, can he ever come back to run as a president for America again?
Well, if it depends, because he was impeached, right? He was impeached, but not removed from office.
Yes.
So what they would do is, He was impeached by the House of Representatives. It went a year ago. It went to the Senate. The Senate chose to do nothing. The Senate can make up whatever punishment they want. So they could say in their punishment, the Senate would vote, and they could say, not only are you removed from you're removed from office, B, you can never run for president again. Now he could run for president as it is right now. Trump can run for president again because you can serve 2 terms of president, and he has served 1. So he could run, and he says he probably will, and I think he probably will 4 years from now. He could run for president again. They could write that as one of the punishments. The Senate could say you can never run for public office again. You can't be a president. You can't run for Senate. You can't be a governor of Florida. They could make that part of the punishment. As it is right now, he can run. He can run for president again. So, maybe nothing
Okay.
will happen. If I had to bet money on it, I would bet nothing is going to happen. There will be no consequences for Donald Trump. But perhaps something will happen along these lines, the 25th Amendment or impeachment and removal from office. So I just thought if it were to happen and you see it in the news, it's good to know what's going on and how things work. So thought it'd be a interesting topic. It is interesting. I don't think it's good, but I'll say it's interesting that to see parts of the Constitution play out. The founding fathers, when they wrote the Constitution in 1787, 200 years ago, 230 years ago, they had a lot of good ideas. They looked into the future and said, okay, we're making a country, right? They had broken away from England, and they were making a brand new country. And they said, what are the potential problems that are going to pop up? And they saw in the future, they saw some of those problems, and they wrote solutions to some of those problems. They tried to predict some of the problems and solve them before they occurred. A lot of that is the checks and balances system, right? We've talked about the 3 branches of government have to share responsibilities when things happen. That was them seeing into the future and trying to make rules to keep things smoothly. Just like you guys at home, if you have a spouse or if you have kids or or growing up, your parents, you had rules around the house. Maybe no running inside, or you have to take your shoes off or something like that. It's to prevent problems. And so, and sometimes people need punished if they break the rules, but we have rules in our families to prevent. We have no running in the house so that nobody gets hurt. You got to take your shoes off when you come inside so that the carpets don't get dirty, right? We have rules to prevent problems. And so the Constitution, when the founding fathers were writing it, they tried to prevent problems that they saw could occur. And then, when we also have the amendments, right? The 25th Amendment is them trying to solve a problem that they saw could occur. It had occurred because this is shortly after JFK was assassinated, and we've had other presidents die in office and be sick in office, and so they're trying to solve problems. So I think it's terrible, but I think it's interesting to see these things happen, and see the Constitution come into play. Any other questions? About this Constitution ideas or the news? Okay. Well, we can stop a little bit early today. We were going to discuss McCarthyism from the 1950s. Joe McCarthy was a senator in the 1950s. We'll talk about this next week. In the 1950s, it was during the Cold War, right? Which is the tension. It wasn't a war, but it was the tension between the United States and Russia and communism, communist Russia. And Joe McCarthy was a senator who got, uh, for reasons that people don't really know, he sort of got himself all worked up and said that American government was full of secret communists. And he said that he had a secret list of 100 people or something, 200 people or something, um, that people in the government that were communists. And he started having hearings and calling people in front of the Senate and having basically a trial, a court case against people. And uh, it really got out of hand. He trashed a lot of people's lives and reputations. It's an interesting moment in history. 1950s, Joe McCarthy um, just really attacked people that he accused of being communists who mostly were not communists. So it's an interesting moment. We'll plan to talk about that next week. If you see something in the news, the news happens awful fast these days, much faster than it used to. So if you see something in the news that you want to discuss, or you have a question for me and just want to email me, or if you see something that you think would be a good discussion topic for class, send me an email, let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions. Because generally, what I always say is if you're wondering about something, somebody else is also wondering that same thing. The world is a crazy and confusing place. So if you have a question, somebody else probably wants that question answered as well. So send me any questions you may have, or um, otherwise we'll talk next Thursday. Okay. Any questions to wrap up today? Any questions or comments? Okay. Well, thanks for logging in today, everybody. Have a good afternoon, and I'll talk to you next week.
I don't know if I told you this, but I have a part-time job, eating job.
Oh yeah, wasn't it a Chipotle?
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
gonna work tonight. I'm gonna work tonight.
Okay. Yeah. How's that going, Jediah?
I think it's going well, frankly.
That's
I
good.
want you to know there was an incident there that they thought that I did.
Oh, really?
Yeah.